Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another session of Combat Conversations. Two fight fans, two of the most stacked divisions in the UFC, and well, some pretty good conversation. Take a look, tell us what you think. So, in today's episode, my friend and I got into a conversation about the two most happening divisions in the UFC. The 170 division, of course, featuring the likes of superstars like Kamaru Usman, Kobe Covington, Vicente Luque, Leon Edwards, and of course, the marauding Chechnyan Khamzat Chimaev. What should happen next? Where does that division go? And then we move on to the next part of our conversation, which is one division lower, 155 with the lightweights, and another similarly crowded division in the top five with the likes of Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, Justin Gaethje, and the not so popular and not quite as often talked about Beneil Dariush. We're talking about, the matchups, the potential matchups, what might happen when these guys go up against each other, who we think we're likely to see next, and what those results might be. Take a look, listen to what we have to say about it, and we'd love to hear what you think about our opinions. So do post in the comments below. Let's take a look at those conversations now. Why don't we start off with the first topic on our mind, which is the 170-pound division, what has happened with Usman. He has basically cleared out the whole division except for Leon Edwards, and Leon Edwards' fight with Jorge Masvidal is now off. What do you think is going to happen in that division now?
I think the exciting thing in that division is Hamza, but I think he's a very long way away from fighting Usman because of his rankings. In fact, the latest I hear is that the fight with Burns has also been cancelled because Burns is number 3 and Chimaev is number 11. I think Usman for the moment needs to just wait it out. I think Leon Edwards is probably the next fight for him, and I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree, man. I think Leon, if anybody right now, is the only guy Usman hasn't fought recently. He's been on a winning streak, and God knows that guy deserves a shot if anybody does. And I think we need to answer that question and then perhaps move on from there, because it's been too much of a Leon Edwards being the dark horse when it comes to 170.
The thing with Leon is, who is he beat? That's the thing. So I'm just pulling up. See, the only guy who I see over here is Vicente Luque. So he beat Vicente Luque. He beat him in 2017, which was 4 years ago. But apart from that, there's absolutely nobody. We have Donald Cerrone, we have Nate Diaz, we have Rafael dos Anjos in 2019, different from the old RDA. He was done and dusted by 2019. So yes, he's got a winning streak of beating guys. I don't think he's beaten a single top 5 guy in that entire 9-match winning streak. But I guess he's the next for Usman.
So I'll tell you the two biggest names that come to mind with Leon Edwards is he didn't beat Bilal Muhammad. That was an eye poke and he got pulled out of that. But he beat Nate Diaz. He didn't look good in the fight because of the way it went down in the last round. I mean, he got wobbled after having a good lead. Almost ended up getting finished in that last few seconds of that fight. So it wasn't a great look, but he did beat Nate Diaz.
I think Vicente Luque could be the next one for Usman as well.
But then if you say that, this guy beat Vicente Luque last, so...
True. I'm looking at Vicente Luque's recent streak. Good, but again, nobody in the top 5. Right, so in conclusion, I think where we stand right now is that Usman's lapped almost everyone. The last guy left to lap is Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards is probably the next one because he's got that 9-fight winning streak. Nobody in the top 5. I think maybe nobody in the top 7. But he's got the winning streak, and I guess he's going to be the one next. In my opinion, he's probably going to get beaten because I've noticed the best guys have to be well-rounded. And Leon has that wrestling Achilles heel. And the moment you have that, any type of Achilles heel, you get screwed. We saw Justin being very weak in the transitions on the floor Achilles heel. And every time Khabib got him on the ground, he managed to isolate an arm or a neck or something like that. So, like we've seen in the past in these championship fights, if you have any Achilles heel, they're gonna expose you.
Yeah, I think so. And no man more well-rounded than Usman. There's a reason he's the pound for pound number one right now. But we'll see what happens. And I guess Hamzat is the dark horse, and then you've got a few other guys in between. We'll see if he can run through those guys, and if Usman's still sitting on top at that point in time. But speaking of Justin's Achilles heel, that's another division that's kind of gotten a bit crowded at the top. So we have Dustin and Charles Oliveira fighting very soon, couple of weeks for the lightweight title. We've got two bona fide contenders snapping at their heels in the wings. We've got Justin Gaethje and we've got Islam Makhachev, both with a good case that they deserve to fight for the title next. What do you think is going to happen? And do you think there's one that deserves it over the other? What do you think should be going on next out there?
I would, for me personally, the more exciting fight would be Islam versus Oliveira, because I've seen Justin fight top opponent before. I haven't seen Islam fight top five guys before, and that's why, for me personally, Islam's a better fight. But I think both guys had their reasons to want that fight. I think Justin thinks that he's faced better ranked guys and beaten higher ranked guys in the last few years. And I think Islam Makhachev feels that he's unbeaten and Justin's already got a title shot. He's lost. In fact, every time Justin's fought top ranked opponents outside the case of Tony Ferguson, he's lost. And I think that's the reason Islam feels he should get the next title shot.
Yeah, and honestly, for my money, if I had to pick between those two, and I don't know if it'll come down to that, I don't know if they're going to run a number one contender shot between these two. Justin is a bit banged up after his recent fight with Chandler. So if they do that, though, my money is on Islam. I think he's the more well rounded fighter. His striking's not bad. And the problem is good grappling or strong grappling can outdo gaps in striking. But if your striking is damn good, but you have big gaps in grappling, takedowns, ground game, it becomes very difficult to plug that hole against a grappler of Islam's caliber.
True. Again, we go back to well rounded, what we discussed 5 minutes ago. The moment you have any weakness, your opponent's just going to focus on that. Take Dan Hooker versus Islam, for example. Islam could finish the fight in seconds because Dan Hooker is very weak. He could change levels because Dan Hooker can't wrestle. And Dan Hooker doesn't know jiu-jitsu, so he has no defense and he just got submitted. And I think that's the only reason, again, sorry for switching topics, but that's the only reason I think Kobe could give Usman his best two fights he's ever had. Because he's got a jiu-jitsu coach, he's a very good wrestler, and he can strike a bit as well. So I think being well-rounded is really important. So like I said, even for me personally, I would like to see Islam versus Oliveira. Oliveira also is a very well-rounded fighter. So I think it'd be a very good match. I see I see Justin versus Oliveira going the same way as Chandler versus Oliveira. So I think Justin's going to be this guy who's going to come out and swing for the fences. And I think Oliveira is going to be more technical. And I think he'll get the better of Justin.
Yeah, and I guess we already have the answer to what happens if Justin fights Poirier. We've already seen what happens there. But yeah, in some sense, I think the Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira might actually be sort of the closest we'll get to see what had happened if Habib and Tony had fought. In some sense, a guy who's good off his back, a guy who's got good submissions, a slightly thin, wiry kind of guy who can wrap his limbs around you. And then, obviously Islam is basically Habib 2.0. He's his protege, his younger, co-training partner, trained by the same coaches. So be interesting. I think in at 155, I 100% agree that is the most interesting fight right now. I'd love to see that. But do you think that happens? Because you think Charles Oliveira can get through Dustin Poirier, or do you think Dustin's the one who's up against the wall here?
I think it's a close fight, man. I think that's a very difficult one to call. I think both guys, I think there are no favorites for that fight. In fact, you know what I'm really surprised about? How little that fight's being talked about. It's just the most untalked about fight. It's happening in less than a month. What's the date now? 24th November. When's that fight happening? 11th December?
December 11th. So we're like, it's like 2 weeks from now. Okay, that's it.
So there's just absolutely nobody talking about this fight, correct?
I don't understand how that happens. I don't know why certain fights are more popular and certain fights aren't, but this isn't that different from like a Kobe Covington Kamaru Usman fight. You know, two guys at the top of that division and both world beaters. I mean, that's going to be a hell of a fight, man. And Dustin has actually been a part of two of the biggest pay-per-views this year because he fought Conor both times, and there's just no carry into his own event for some reason, especially since he's fighting Charles Oliveira, who again brings nothing to the table in terms of popularity. Unfortunately, he's just not popular.
True. It's a very untalked about fight. Apart from the fighters, I don't see too many UFC promos being put out there. I don't see the usual suspects as Joe Rogan, Ariel Armani, etc. I don't see any of those guys trying to promote this fight. So I think it's a pretty untalked about fight. Shouldn't be that way. It's a very interesting fight. It's a damn interesting.
Pretty crazy. I think it's one of the best fights right now in not just the 155, but I think across the UFC. I'm quite surprised why there's not more talk about this. And you're right. Usually, when you have a big event like this, you know, on the social media channels, this, that, you'll get a lot of push, a lot of promos, this, that, and the other. It seems to be a bit muted for the Poirier fight. I don't understand it, man. It makes no sense.
In fact, I see the fight being promoted the most, or maybe that's just the way it's turned out in my feed, is your Cyril Gane, is Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. That's the one I think the most talked about. I think that's in January. But this one, yeah, funny, the most stacked division. And Charles Oliveira, I've been very bullish on him since I saw the Kevin. So ever since I saw Oliveira versus Kevin Lee a few years ago, I've been extremely bullish on Oliveira. I think that match marked the rise of the stand-up Oliveira. Really good footwork, really good head movement, really good hands. So I think I've been really bullish on it ever since.
Yeah, unfortunately, the guy doesn't speak any English, so I guess he doesn't appeal to the larger North American audience. Things that generally a shy chap, not much of a personality. He's just the fighter's fighter. You know, he doesn't have all the flash and stuff.
Who do
To
you think
another
is going to
very
win?
interesting. Like I said, buddy, I'm rooting for Poirier on this. I think Poirier is going to pull it out. But I mean, I think by the narrowest of margins, like if they fought 10 times, it would be a situation of which guy won 6 fights and which guy won 4 fights. It's close.
How do you think he'll pull it off?
Poirier, I think what's going to happen with Poirier is he's going to stun him on the feet, and he's just going to be the more burly, stronger sort of. He'll be able to manhandle that guy a little bit. And Poirier's submissions are not a joke, man. He's decent. In fact, Habib actually admitted that that first or the second guillotine that he tried was a little bit tight. And if you watch those replays, man, that's not something to scoff at. He's caught Habib in a possible choke. So he's not too bad on the ground either, and especially when the guy's a little stunned and a little wobbled from the thrashing on the feet, I think he may be able to overwhelm Oliveira on the ground after that. I don't know though. It's close, man. It's a tough one, and not to say Oliveira is going to get rattled.
Just playing devil's advocate. Kevin Lee is a burly guy, even more so than Dustin Poirier. I think Oliveira handled him fine. And then he handled Michael Chandler pretty okay too.
Yeah, so my problem with Kevin Lee off late is maybe a burly, big, sort of strong guy, but poor performances. Hasn't really been winning, has lost more fights than he's won. He's jumped around the divisions, he's done a few things that really makes me question his credentials. He did handle Chandler well, but Chandler is not very good on the ground. You saw what happens when Chandler and Gaethje went to the ground. They were holding each other and smiling at the camera like there was really no activity. So Chandler on the ground, I'm not surprised Oliveira pulled him in and just trapped him there. It was Chandler's, loss to have gone down there. After he stunned him, he should have stood up and asked the ref to stand him up. He had a better chance trying to do that. Anyway, so I think Dustin's much more well-rounded on the ground. And I think he's not a rusher like Chandler. He's more technical. I mean, he outboxed Conor, which is no joke, 2 times in a row. Poirier is a different animal, bro. I think we're doing Poirier a disservice if we don't acknowledge that, with the exception of Habib, in the last so many years, who has that man lost to? He knocked out Gaethje. He took Dan Hooker to the end, but man, Dan Hooker, I think, hasn't been the same fighter since. He absolutely smashed Conor 2 times. His fight against Max Holloway, when before he fought Habib, like, Max is supposed to be an amazing boxer. He touched Max up big time in that fight. That guy's hands are special. Poirier is an underrated striker. I think he's better than Conor. I mean, it's obvious. He beat Conor twice and he outstruck him.
He's damn good. Poirier is damn good. He lost to Khabib, but everyone lost to Khabib. So Poirier is damn good. In fact, I don't think Oliveira, even the new King Oliveira, can stand up with Poirier. I think the best chance he has is doing something on the ground. He's the guy with the highest submissions in the UFC, I think, or in that division, I think. So I think that's his best chance.
Well, thank you so much, Aki, for joining me. These conversations with you are always stimulating, immensely interesting for me, and it gives me an opportunity to get another fight fan's perspective. So thank you so much for joining me, and thanks to all of you for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and follow. I will see you in another episode.